Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Kicking CASK podcast. My name is Laura Hattersley, and today's episode is going to be something a little bit different. We have Emma Gilmartin, who is a volunteer for a charity called HCPT. And what HCPT does, although Emma is going to explain all about it, is it takes disabled children on holidays to Lourdes in France, and it's completely free. So she's going to explain all about it and how this opportunity is available to our families. Enjoy. We're so lucky to have Emma, who is here to talk to us about a charity that she volunteers for, and the charity is called HCPT. She's going to tell us what that stands for, what it can do for our families, for you guys listening, and hopefully answer any questions we might have. So thank you, Emma, for coming on.
It's okay. Hi, thanks for having me. So to answer your first question that you kind of indirectly asked there, Laura, HCPT doesn't really stand for anything anymore. Historically it did, but the language has now been superseded and we don't use it anymore. So we're now just known as HCPT, the Pilgrimage Trust. So essentially what that means is that we take, at Easter at least, we take children and young people who are either disabled or disadvantaged, and we take them to a place called Lourdes in the south of France, which is a Catholic shrine. What we go to Lourdes for is to take children from these backgrounds that I've described, to allow them to experience a pilgrimage holiday. And the idea of a pilgrimage holiday is that it's a family affair. So we go in small regional groups. Each group will have a number of children that they're supporting that year. So let's say, for example, they've got 7 or 8 children. They'll have roughly double the amount of volunteer helpers. And in addition to that, they will have at least one nurse in every group.
So when you say it's a family affair,
Yes.
Do the parents come along with the children?
Not necessarily. They can in some circumstances, but really part of the idea is to take those children on a holiday that is a special occasion for them, but it also then provides the family at home with some respite. So in advance of going on the trip, the children will meet the volunteers and the nurses that are going to look after them. And that might take the form of like a number of visits to the family home, but it could also mean that the child will be taken out for the day with some of the other children that are going to go on the trip that year. And so by the time the trip comes around, they're not going away with strangers. They are with trusted adults that they've met and that the family has met. And it gives the families the opportunity to then just have a week where they can do something maybe with the other children in the family, or just a week off, basically.
Yeah, and that's so important. I don't actually know of another charity or any opportunities where our children can go abroad and the families, the parents don't need to go with them, and they can actually have that holiday or that respite themselves.
Yeah.
There might be some organizations like that, but I haven't come across any. So when you told me about HCPT,
Yeah.
it did sound like something that I want more people to know about.
Mhm.
But I think one of the first questions I asked you was, I'm not a Catholic.
Yeah.
Does this still apply? So
Of course
how
it does.
how does it kind of work with the fact that it's obviously organized by the Catholic Church? How religious is it? And what are the perimeters for being able to attend and have their child go?
So in terms of the children that we take to Lourdes, they can be of all faiths or none. We take the child based on their needs, not based on, their religion or, a particular group that they might belong to. And the same goes for their families. We really, that's not the name of the game. Many of the volunteers are Catholic, but also many of the volunteers are not Catholic at all. And when we go to Lourdes, we do celebrate Mass every day, but it's like no other mass that you will have ever experienced. It is completely child-centric, and there's a lot of singing. It's incredibly inclusive. It's very, very noisy. There's lots of kind of children with tambourines and maracas, or with bells around their wrists and ankles, so that they can all join in and make noise and sing and just join in whatever way they're able to.
So what level of need of children are you able to take? Because obviously within the CASK community, we've got a huge spectrum, a huge range of physical and emotional needs. So
Yeah.
would you be able to take children in wheelchairs? Would you be able to take children who can't do anything for themselves?
Yeah, so we can take, really it depends on the nurse in each individual group. So because we're a nurse-led, the groups are nurse-led, it as long as the nurse is able to meet that child's medical needs while we are away, so depending on what medication they're on, or if they're tube fed, as long as the nurse is able to deal with that, then that child can go to Lourdes. We have children from disadvantaged backgrounds, so who have no medical or physical needs, all the way through to children who, are permanent wheelchair users who are unable to care for themselves in any way, shape, or form, unable to communicate. Yeah, the whole kind of gamut.
And how do you get them all to Lourdes?
With a lot of kind of willpower and manpower, I guess. So we charter flights, and yeah, we put the groups on planes and we carry the children if we're unable to push their wheelchairs up the aisles, or if we can put them in aisle chairs, then we do. Yeah, and we fly them, and if they have, specific requirements that mean that they need to sit in some kind of molded seat, for example, then we do what we need to do to make that happen.
So how long is the trip, and what does a typical day look like? Okay, can you give us some examples of the other things
Yeah.
they get up to?
So the trip is anywhere between sort of 5 and 7 days. It just depends. Different groups will travel for slightly different durations. And it just really depends on personal preference of the groups as a whole.
So could you just quickly describe where Lourdes is? Because
Yeah.
actually, I don't have a clue. So what is in the vicinity, and what other activities the children get to do?
Yeah. So Lourdes is a small town in the foothills of the Pyrenees in the south of France. The nearest sort of big city is Toulouse, but that's about an hour and a half's drive away. Um, the flights that we charter fly into Lourdes, so there's an airport in Lourdes itself. But you find that some groups will fly into Toulouse and then get a coach. Um, there's loads to do. So you can go for day trips in the mountains. There's some beautiful little tiny villages where you kind of go up little windy mountain passes on a coach. And often you get to the top and there's still snow. There's like a beautiful river that runs through this one particular little village that we often go to. The children are able to go on donkey rides if that's something they're physically capable of doing, or they can just go and see the animals that are there. Other day trips that some groups go on, they'll take a coach to the beach. So slightly longer trip, it's about 2 hours on the coach, but they'll go to the beach for the day. And some groups are really hardcore. We go at Easter, the weather is pretty hit and miss. Sometimes it will be glorious sunshine, but certainly some of the groups from Yorkshire, because they breed us hardy up north, they'll go in the sea even if it's pouring with rain and freezing cold. If the children want to, obviously, we're not forcing anybody to do anything. But there's also a zoo that they can go to. One trip that I've been on in the past is there are some like caves with like stalactites and stalagmites that they can go and look at. There's all sorts. So it really is a proper holiday with everything you would expect from, a fun holiday for children.
And you say about the fact that you use coaches,
Yeah,
but obviously quite a lot of our children are in wheelchairs and
yeah,
require wheelchair accessible vehicles. So how
yeah.
do you transport them about?
We have wheelchair accessible coaches. So we have coaches that are specifically made with a set number of seats, and then they have a set number of spaces for wheelchairs. And depending again, it all depends on the child's needs and their ability. So if they are able to go in, if they have a car seat, for example, then that can often be sent with them, and we can install that in a coach seat, or if they need to, then they just stay in their wheelchair, and that will be secured on the coach.
Wow, incredible. It does sound like you literally can do, well, miracles almost.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. We try.
So do you get Do people, once they've gone one time, do they
Mhm.
want to go again? I
Yes.
guess because that's a good way of knowing whether they enjoy it.
Yeah.
And also, what are the age ranges for
Mhm.
people that you take?
So the age range for the children is between 8 and 18. And in that period, they can generally travel 3 times. Some children are really lucky and they end up being associated with more than one group and they'll get more than 3 trips out of it. But on average, we tend to take most kids 3 times. If we don't meet them until they're a bit older, then they might only get 1 or 2 trips. But yeah, generally speaking, if we meet them when they're young, and we sort of, yeah, we'll take them a few times. So we won't necessarily take the same child multiple years on the trot unless they have a particular need that means that that's the right thing for them. Um, but yeah, we try and spread it out so they sort of get to experience it when they're quite little, and somewhere in the middle, and then when they're a little bit older as well.
So I guess you get to know some of the families really well then.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
do. And there are multiple children that I've been lucky enough to look after more than once. And it's lovely because the first time you meet them, they're obviously a little bit shy and depending on their ability as well, they may be, if they can communicate, then, like I say, they'll be shy and it takes them a while to warm up to you. But then if they come back in a few years' time, they're that little bit older, so they're usually a little bit more confident anyway. But also they recognize you and it's just like meeting an old friend again. And yeah, it's great. It is, and it's lovely to see them grow. And some of them, if they're able to when they're older, will then come back as helpers, which is lovely. That kind of feels like they've sort of gone full circle then.
So if you could just describe a little bit more about the range of children that
Mhm.
you met and that you've seen in other groups.
Yeah, yeah. So as I said before, they range from kind of completely physically capable all the way through to people who need, all full personal care basically. So I have looked after one of the first children I looked after actually was a little girl who was a permanent wheelchair user and she relied on other people for absolutely everything. She couldn't communicate verbally at all. And yeah, she needed help with absolutely everything from, washing and changing to dressing and eating and sort of, yeah, everything basically. Um, I personally haven't looked after any children like this, but I know that there are groups that have um, kind of specialist nurses who travel as volunteers, and they have children who require suction on a regular basis, and are on some really very specific medication, or a tube fed. Um, Literally any need that exists out there, we will try and meet it if we can to enable that child to travel.
And what about because some of our children have behavioral needs as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah.
Obviously there's levels that can be kind of coped with in a way, like by
Yeah.
people that don't know them. So I think
Hmm.
every family realizes that. But are you able to cope with I guess maybe more on the autistic
Yeah.
spectrum?
So every child will be assessed kind of on their own merit, if you like, and it will just depend on whether the group that is sort of trying to offer that child a place has the expertise and experience to be able to meet their needs. Um, we have a lot of volunteers who are teachers in both mainstream and special educational schools. We have many volunteers who are medical professionals who, have a lot of experience with all sorts of needs that these children come with. We also will ensure that we speak to the families, we speak to the medical teams that look after these children at home. We will speak to their schools if appropriate, to kind of gain as much of a clear picture of who that child is and what their needs are before we offer them a place. But we will always try and do what we can to take any child that we meet.
Wow. So if a family is interested, it's definitely worth them getting in touch, even if they're not sure,
Absolutely.
because obviously you would come and assess and you'd be very
Yes.
honest, I'm guessing, like whether, you know,
Yeah,
it would work out or not. But it's definitely worth approaching
definitely.
HCPT.
And what might happen is that, you may well I mean, I think you said to me, Laura, after we chatted recently, that it turns out you know somebody who has an involvement with HCPT or knows of other people that have travelled with HCPT. More often than not, you probably know someone. And I think you have links to families in the US and in other countries that have children that might benefit from travelling to Lourdes. We have HCPT is a UK charity, but we also have an association with IPT, which is the Irish Pilgrimage Trust. And then in the US, we have ASCPG, which is the American Special Children's Pilgrimage Group. And we all kind of come under the same umbrella. We also have international groups in Europe, and we have groups from the West Indies that travel as well. So we're global. There's
Wow.
groups everywhere.
Do they all go to Lourdes or do they go to
Yeah.
places closer to home?
No, they all come to Lourdes.
Oh my
So we
goodness.
have we have people from the States that basically, yeah, get on planes with a load of kids and they fly to Paris and then they make their way down to Lourdes, and the guys from the West Indies do similar.
That is absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. We'll
Yeah.
put all the links
Yes.
on the podcast details bit and also on our website. So if you could, yeah, send us all the links for the different
Absolutely.
international organizations,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
obviously, yeah, CASK is an international disorder. It doesn't know
Yeah,
any
yeah.
boundaries, sadly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be amazing. Um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, I think the last thing you just wanted to touch upon was just safeguarding, and
Yeah.
obviously you're putting your child in the hands of, you said they're not
Strangers.
strangers in the end, but
Yeah.
they will be strangers at the
Yeah, yeah.
beginning.
Yeah. So we're fully aware that we basically are asking you to give us your most precious thing, your children. Um, so HCPT is completely committed to safeguarding and promoting the welfare of children and young people. And we also recognise that the people that we are taking to Lourdes are particularly vulnerable. So it's kind of it takes it up a level. So all staff, all of the group leaders and deputy group leaders receive really robust safeguarding training prior to travel, and that training is then cascaded down to all of the volunteers that travel with HCPT. You can only travel with HCPT if in England if you have an enhanced DBS disclosure, and then I think in Scotland and Ireland and other countries they do something called PVG. Um, or if that scheme doesn't apply in their country, then it's whatever the local equivalent is, basically. So yeah, everybody has to go through that process.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. But it just sounds like an
Okay.
amazing opportunity, and I can't believe I've not
Yeah.
heard of it before. And
Yeah.
I think I want to say thank you for like volunteering for them and all the other people that volunteer, even though I've not experienced it, because it just
Yeah.
sounds like uh, something that is so needed
Mhm.
and so lacking,
Mhm.
really, giving children like ours the ability to go abroad and giving the families just that
Yeah.
little bit of extra space and extra time without the constant kind of care that is required. It can be
Yeah.
quite a burden, even though parents would never want to use that
No,
word.
but
But and I don't think you realize until you've had that time, that free time,
yeah.
how kind of much anxiety and how exhausting it is, because you just
Mhm.
carry on, don't you? You just do it.
Yeah.
But knowing that
And
your child's
we
having so much fun and doing something,
yeah.
going somewhere that you've not even ever been before
Yeah, yeah. And
is,
also
is
doing
great.
things that, having experiences that you want your children to have and might have thought they would never be able to have. You want them to experience a bit of independence and going and doing things without their family. So yeah, it's lovely to be able to provide that. And as a volunteer, it is the most exhausting thing I've ever done, but it's also the most rewarding and just amazing thing I've ever done. And we do come away from that week and just think, you families that live with these children on a permanent basis, it doesn't matter how amazing that child is, it is exhausting work. So yeah, I think it's the least we can do is to help out for a week a year.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on and being our
It's
first ever
okay.
guest. So,
Thank you.
yeah, it's been really nice talking to you. And I hope some of our families apply.
Yeah,
But if
love
not,
it.
and it's not obviously this is not just for cask. This is for as Emma has so excellently explained, it is for any child with any disability, and even people from more difficult backgrounds. So
Yeah.
so it just feels good to get the word out, to be honest. And hopefully somebody who really needs it will be able
Yeah.
to take you guys up on the offer.
Be amazing.